I'm going to do a few sort of like housekeeping slides that I'm going to breeze through really quickly so that we can just get started on the training today. The first thing I wanted to say is, hi, my name is Carla. I'm from Homebase, and Homebase is a technical assistance provider. And what we do is we support the Santa Clara Office of Supportive Housing on a lot of different things. But one of the things that we do is we actually help to coordinate these trainings with external partners, and sometimes Homebase actually does the training. You might be familiar already with these trainings, but essentially, we keep folks muted. And so we ask that folks stay muted when you're not talking and while the presenters are talking. Here are the slides. And we do have captions available. If you have any trouble getting those captions to work for you, please just let us know in the chat, or you can private message me. Please go ahead and type in questions in the chat as they come up. And also, if you have any tech issues, our Homebase team email, Santa Clara CoC at Santa Clara CoC at homebaseccc.org. You can actually message us there, and we're the ones who have been sending out the training announcements, and we can provide you a tech support if you fall off this training. And so, yeah, we're going to get started. Let me just stop sharing my screen here. And I don't know, Juliana and Lisa, if y'all wanted to introduce yourselves while I pull up your slides, please go ahead.
Sure. And yes, and we can send a PDF version of the slides to share out. I see someone was asking that in the chat as well. Hi, I'm Lisa Newstrom. I am the managing attorney at Bay Area Legal Aid, which we have a slide to explain who we are if we are not familiar with us. And I also practice in public benefits law and a little bit in immigration. And so I will be presenting today along with my colleague Juliana here.
Hi, my name is Juliana Mancini, and I am a staff attorney at Bay Area Legal Aid. And I also practice in the public benefits area, which includes CalWORKS, CalFresh, general assistance, and Social Security benefits.
And because of our schedule today, we're just going to jump right in. And as I said, these slides we are going to be sharing out. So we're not going to cover all the details on every slide, but we're going to try and hit the high points. And our goal today is just to help you understand the broad strokes of what the CalWORKS program is, who it's for, how it works, what sorts of help clients can get from it, and also how to navigate the kind of like bumps and barriers that might come up as clients are trying to access it. And one of the things is when it comes to those bumps and barriers, we want to make sure you understand there are things people can do about it. There are due process rights. People can appeal denials. A lot of times there's little mistakes that just get made because of gaps in communication, gaps in information. And that is the sort of thing that public benefits attorneys like Juliana help people with. Knowing what the program is, how clients can get help from it, and how you can connect folks to us if they need help. So let's just jump in. And we are from Bay Area Legal Aid, which does free civil legal services for low-income residents in the Bay Area. And these are our main practice areas.
All right, so what is CalWORKS? Lisa kind of covered a little bit, but CalWORKS is...
Can we go back one slide? I think we skipped ahead.
Yeah.
There we go.
Oh. I think we... Yep,
there we
go. Slide. So CalWORKS is federally known as the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, which they call TANF. In the state of California, we call it the CalWORKS program, which is California Work Opportunity and Responsibility to Kids. And this is a time-limited program, and we will talk a little bit about time limits later. And it's supposed to transition people to from being on these benefits to working. And there are two components to CalWORKS. The first one is eligibility. So what do you need to do to qualify for these benefits? What income level do you need to be at? And then the welfare to work requirement. And that is what you need to keep doing to keep getting these benefits.
On the CalWORKS eligibility side, CalWORKS, we said, is designed for families with children. So how do they define family? You have to have at least one adult caretaker relative, often a parent, but it could be another relative. And a relative can be through marriage, even if there is divorce. So it could be aunt, it could be uncle, it could be um, uncle's ex-wife still counts as a relative, right? So adult caretaker relative with at least one minor child in the home, or it can be a single adult who is pregnant. One question we get asked all the time. So if there's like split custody, who gets the CalWORKS? So 51% of the time, whoever has the kids. So literally doing the math. And then if it's really truly 50-50, which it almost never is when you do that math out, then it's whoever applies first. Or if there's a court order saying which parent can apply. The child has to meet some sort of like quote unquote deprivation requirement, meaning like they are deprived of parental support or care. At least one of their parents is absent from the home, deceased, disabled, which they call incapacitated. So they don't have to be like on disability benefits, but unemployed or underemployed. And so even a two-parent family often qualifies based on unemployment or underemployment if their income is low enough to qualify for CalWORKS. So it's pretty rare that you have trouble with that deprivation requirement. And of course, they have to be a California resident. They have to apply for the CalWORKS in the county they live in, but they're not like, it's not like the rules are different when you cross county lines. Okay, next slide. This is a question that comes up all the time, especially in Santa Clara County, where we have a lot of immigrant and mixed status families. So there are certain folks who are eligible, folks with green cards, folks who have refugee, asylee status, trafficking survivors, folks who are doing like what's called a VAWA petition based on abuse, all sorts of humanitarian parolees, special immigrants. And then there is a very narrow category in CalWORKS of people called PRUCOL, permanently residing under color of law. If you're familiar with PRUCOL in the Medi-Cal standard, it's a little more narrow than that. U visa applicants or holders, we see a lot of those in our work because we work a lot with domestic violence survivors and survivors of crime. T visas for trafficking survivors. So there have been some changes at the federal level in terms of who is federally eligible for TANF, but these folks continue to be eligible in California, either under federal funding or state funding. You don't need to worry about which funding stream is used. These folks are eligible for CalWORKS. Okay, next slide. And then some people, when CalWORKS gives assistance, it gives it to what's called an assistance unit. Rather than saying the family or the household, it says this is the assistance unit. So if you imagine a Venn diagram, people who are living together may or may not be in the assistance unit, Only people who live together can be in the assistance unit, though. With some exceptions if they're temporarily living apart, like if, let's say, mom and teenage son are in separate shelters because of like age limits or something like that. But typically they have to be living together. The most common assistance unit, or AU, is parents and minor children. Some people can choose to be in the assistance unit or not. And then there's special rules about if their income counts or not. So typically people who live with the family but are not in the assistance unit, usually their income doesn't count. So let's say a roommate, a housemate, something like that. If there are immigrant family members who either are not eligible for CalWORKS, or who opt out, which is a thing they're allowed to do if they're an immigrant, then they can be out of the assistance unit. They won't get aid for that individual. But if it's parents, that individual's income will still be used to calculate the benefit, and they do still need to report that income. Step parents who don't have kids in the household, they can be in or out. A non-parent caretaker also, like if it's grandma or aunt or someone, can choose to get aid just for the children and not count that caretaker's income at all. So let's say grandma's on Social Security, her Social Security is fixed income, but it's a little too high to qualify for CalWORKS. She can opt out of the unit, get aid for the kids, and her income won't be used to calculate at all. Okay. If she wants to get aided from CalWORKS, then her income does need to count. And parents can't opt out of counting their income. Okay, next slide.
So I'm not going to go over all the numbers on this slide, but this is just to kind of explain there are two separate income tests for CalWORKS. There is one for people who are applying to CalWORKS. And so when you apply to CalWORKS, they're going to look at your gross income, and they are going to look to see if your gross income is under these amounts on the slide. And then for once you are already on CalWORKS and you are recertifying your benefits, they are going to look at your countable income and see if it falls under one of these numbers. And on the next slide, we will kind of talk a little bit about how they calculate what countable income is. And on this slide, we also show there is a difference between exempt and non-exempt for recipients. And so an exempt household is going to be one where every parent or every aided adult in the household is disabled and is receiving certain disability benefits, or there is a non-needy caretaker relative who's not included in the assistance unit. Next slide. So what income counts for applicants? They first look at your gross income, and then they eliminate any excluded income, which we'll talk about on the next slide. And then they subtract $600 only from your gross earned income. And then the remainder of that income is going to count for purposes of determining eligibility for CalWORKS benefits. For people who are already on CalWORKS benefits, the math we say is a little bit more generous, but it's also more complicated, and we're not going to go through the whole calculation, but essentially they give you $600 that you can subtract from any disability income, and up to $600 plus 50%. So they half your earned income.
And nobody is expecting you all to be able to like rattle off a CalWORKS budget from this. We just want to give you a sense of how income counts. It's kind of like doing taxes. You get a certain amount of a deduction, and then earned income is treated more favorably than unearned income. So just to give you a sense of why you can have two families that might look really similar on paper, and have a similar household size and similar dollars coming in, but one family might be eligible and one family might not be. So, okay, next slide.
And so these are just some examples of excluded income, and I will say this is not inclusive of all excluded income, but I think the most important things to point out here is that $100 of child support passes directly through to the family. So, you know, if there's $600 being paid a month in child support, only 500 of that is going to impact the CalWORKS benefits. And then let's say someone is working or someone is going to school and they are doing work study or they are getting loans or grants. Those are also going to be excluded. In-kind support from nonprofit organizations, loans, and back pay for CalWORKS benefits. Next slide.
Yeah, one thing, if we can just go back to that slide for 1 second, because I know you all are working a lot of times with folks who are, well, you're all working with folks who are in the homeless prevention system. A lot of those folks may be getting certain housing assistance on a very temporary basis. And we sometimes see confusion around this when people go to apply for CalWORKS, especially because folks don't often know how to explain. And also, eligibility workers aren't always familiar with all the exceptions. And they don't know how to categorize what the person is telling them. So they might say, like, for example, oh, a boat is helping me pay the rent. And the eligibility worker who's not familiar with what that is and all the rules might count that amount of money as income the person has. But that should be excluded for various reasons. So that's something that comes up a lot with our CoC families.
And that is something that someone could get legal services to assist with if that does come up.
Yeah, that's a very common sort of example where we can just help explain the rule to the worker, get the proof that they need of what the money is, and resolve that issue. Okay, sorry, next slide.
Lisa, I think this one is you.
Yes. Okay. So for immigrants who have an immigration sponsor, which not all immigrants do, but if folks have a green card through a family member or an employer, then they usually have an immigration sponsor. Typically, it's through a family member. The sponsor may not be a family member, but in order to get that family-based green card, they have to have a financial sponsor. And the rule for CalWORKS is that the income and resources of the sponsor count as the recipient's own income until the immigrant works in the US for 10 years or more or becomes a citizen. But there are a lot of exceptions to this. And again, this is one where the general rule is you have to give information about your sponsor. They have to get income information from the sponsor, and the sponsor's income is used to calculate your benefit, which means you usually don't qualify. But in most cases where an immigrant is actually needing the CalWORKS, one of the exceptions is going to apply. And so when they're filling out the application, it's not always clearly asking them about all the exceptions. And so this is another area where we often see folks needing legal assistance to help kind of communicate and explain the facts. So if there is a domestic violence related reason that they're not able to get support from the sponsor or that it would increase their risk of further abuse. It may not be that the sponsor is the abuser themselves, but they might be somehow connected to the abuser, like it was a family friend of the abuser or the parent of the abuser or something like that. That is a reason for the county not to need to contact that sponsor, and the sponsor's income won't be counted. There's also something called the hungry or homeless exception, which they can get for up to a year if they can explain that the sponsor is not actually providing money to them. and that without the CalWORKS, they will be hungry or homeless. And or that they are needing the CalWORKS to escape homelessness or hunger. So in that case, they can get an exception as well. Also, just mention it because we do have a lot of folks here who are refugees, and I'm using that in the official technical sense. A lot of times we use refugees to describe anyone who has fled here for reasons. But refugees, when I'm talking about that, it's people who were brought here by the US Department of State with refugee status from the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. We have a lot of those folks. And they have a special type of refugee sponsor that's like a nonprofit, or it could be even like an individual. But those refugee sponsors, there's no deeming for that. So that is just something that also gets like misunderstood and miscommunicated a lot. Okay, next slide.
Lisa, just really quickly, we had a question in the chat, and I just wanted to give the answer out loud, just about the DV waivers for sponsor deeming.
Yeah.
Ricardo just asked if legal assistance is required for that and how that is reported. And so legal assistance shouldn't be required for that, but oftentimes some eligibility workers are not familiar with the rules. And so sometimes even when applicants or recipients are explaining that they are victims of domestic violence, the workers do not think about these exemptions. So if that is happening, you can reach out for legal assistance. But the way it works is the person should just be able to say they are victims of domestic violence and that their sponsor is the one abusing them, and that should be sufficient.
Or that their sponsor is connected to the abuse, or
Yes,
somehow that it will hurt them to contact the sponsor.
tack this. Yes. But if that is not enough, please reach out.
Yeah. There's no requirement that anyone have legal assistance in order to get CalWORKS, but we are kind of flagging the most common problems and hurdles we see people running into, where we can kind of assist and help fix any issues. Okay. When it comes to resources, Juliana, is this one yours? I can tackle it. Any property, so there's an income test and a resource test. Income, think of it as money you get each month. Resource, think of it as money you already have or things worth money that you already have when the month starts. So any property that the family owns that has monetary value, and property is, I'm not talking about real estate, although that is one category. But it's like bank accounts, any sort of lump sum, anything worth money, as long as it's actually available. So if there's a reason they can't access it, like it's in a foreign country and they can't sell it or like access that money right now, then they should report it, but they should also explain that it's not actually available to them. And the resource limits are much higher in CalWORKS than some other programs. So the current limit is $12,000, or $18,000 for families with a disabled or an older household member. And there are some things that don't count towards that resource limit. Next slide.
Yeah, there are lots, I would say a good amount of things that don't count. So the home where the family resides. So if a family owns their home, that home is going to be an excluded resource. Household goods. So this would be, pots, pans, furniture in your home that you're using. And then tools that that the recipients need for work. So if someone is a handyman, then their tools of the trade that they are using for work can be excluded. I think we have even had cases where people have used like a vehicle, like a specific vehicle or something of that nature for work, and that we have been able to get that excluded. And then a car valued up to $33,499 is also excluded. And then a car of any value can be excluded if it's used for certain purposes.
Okay. So yeah, the car value. So this is one car can be excluded up to $33,000, and a car of any value can be excluded due to one of these other reasons. So if the family has two cars, one that's worth less than $33,000, which is like really generous.
Yeah, a nice car.
Yeah, that it used to be your car had to be worth less than like $1,000, if you can imagine. And so it basically kept everybody from having functional transportation. Now it is much better. You can exclude one car just based on value. And then if you have a second vehicle, you have to find another exemption for it. So it could be that like you have one vehicle that like mom uses to commute to work and another vehicle that's maybe like specially adapted to carry the kid's wheelchair that dad uses to drive the kids around. Also, if it's a vehicle related to work, like I had a client once who on the weekend sold tacos at the pulga, and so they literally had their minivan that had their taco name on the side. They didn't believe that it was a work related vehicle. They drove it up, showed the worker the sign. Everybody agreed it was a work vehicle. Um, so yep, those are, and received as a gift, donation, or family transfer is one that comes up a lot of times these days as well. And that can be useful if it happens to be a vehicle that's over that value limit as well. But they got it as a gift or a family transfer. Okay. We will try and get into more detailed questions. I see that we have a lot of detailed questions going on in the chat. We're going to try and get through our slides for everybody, and then we will save some time at the end to do questions. We may not be able to answer very specific questions about individual scenarios, but we will talk about like how folks can refer clients to us if there's an issue. I will ever say though that we are talking about all these rules are CalWORKS rules. So we're not talking about CalFresh right now. That would be a different training. Okay. Next slide.
Do we want to do the scenarios, Lisa?
Let's do a few of them because I think
Okay.
it's really helpful to see those. So we're going to talk about Gloria, and Gloria is an amalgamation of various clients we have worked with over the years. So she's the inspired by true events, but not an
And
actual person.
we are going to talk about her. She's going to be the same person we talk about throughout the training. We use her in all of our scenarios. So Gloria is 30 years old and came to the US 4 years ago to join her sister Anna. During the pandemic, Anna left to take a job in Texas and she never came back. Now Gloria works part-time as a waitress and takes care of Anna's 3-year-old daughter, Sophia. Gloria loves Sophia, but her income isn't steady, and she worries about whether she can afford to raise her alone. So, and I think we have polls set up, but can Gloria get CalWORKS for Sophia? Yes, if Gloria's income is low enough. B, yes, no, no matter what Gloria's income is. C, no, because Gloria is not Sophia's mother. And then 2, can Gloria get CalWORKS for herself? I'm not going to read all the answers, but we will Give everybody a little bit of time.
We won't see what answer each person gave. This just helps us
And I
get a
see
sense.
it actually has I think all the polling questions.
Yeah, I think the way that, okay, I think the way that it's coming up is all the questions at the same time. If folks just want to do 1 and 2 and then stop clicking through it, or
Yeah,
unless,
and I
okay.
think we're also going to do questions 3 and 4 are the
Okay.
next slide. So if people want to do questions 1 through 4.
Oh, okay. Yep. Well, there's a little more information before we get to questions 3 and 4. So I think,
Oh, that's true. I
yeah.
can read that information now if people would like. Lisa,
Okay.
I'll defer
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah, let's
Um,
go ahead to the next slide. I think once folks answer the questions once, it won't let us reopen the same poll. So let's just do, we'll read the bit for 3 and 4, and we'll do questions 3 and 4. And then maybe for the others, we can just have folks kind of answer in their heads.
okay. Gloria could not get CalWORKS for herself due to her immigration status, but she was able to get CalWORKS for Sophia. Last month, she lost her job after her abusive boyfriend caused a scene at the restaurant. Today, she found out she is pregnant. And then question 3, will the baby be able to get CalWORKS? And 4, when can Gloria get CalWORKS for herself?
Okay, so let's go back to questions 1 and 2. And okay, so can Gloria get CalWORKS for Sophia? Sophia was born here. Gloria is Sophia's aunt. As Sophia's aunt, Gloria can actually get CalWORKS for Sophia no matter what Gloria's income is. Because Gloria can apply for a child-only grant for the CalWORKS. So even if Gloria works at, is like, I don't know, a software engineer, she can apply it for and get CalWORKS for Sophia only. So it would be an assistance unit of 1. Gloria would not be aided. If Gloria herself is low income and meets other eligibility requirements, which we'll talk about in the next slide, then potentially. So can Gloria get CalWORKS for herself? Only if she has low enough income, only if she is an eligible non-citizen, only if she gets legal custody of Sophia, only if A and B, or only if A, B, and C. Let's see what we have. It looks like the most popular guess was only if she has low enough income. So, oh no, I'm sorry. Only if A and B. Excellent. Okay, so almost half of you got this right. Gloria can get CalWORKS for herself if her income is low enough to be considered in the unit, and if she meets non-citizen eligibility. She does not need legal custody of Sophia. And this is something we've had it come up repeatedly in the last year, folks being mistakenly, incorrectly told by CalWORKS that a non-parent needs legal custody, needs legal guardianship, or something like that to prove that they are caring for a child. That's just not the case. So that's an example of one where we can either file an appeal or work with the ombudsman to get that straightened out. Okay, so she just needs to have low enough income and be an eligible non-citizen. So let's look. Right now, it looks like she is undocumented. I think I believe we had that in the first question. She came here, she doesn't have papers, so she's probably not. It doesn't say.
I think
So
we left it vague.
yes, so maybe she came here on a green card. Maybe her sister sponsored her. Maybe she's eligible. Let's say, for purposes of the next question, that she came here and she was undocumented. Okay, so then even if her income is low enough, she's not going to be eligible. But let's go back to question 3. So after she applied for herself, she couldn't get it due to her immigration status. She was able to get it for Sophia. Then she lost her job because her abusive boyfriend caused a scene. And now she's pregnant. Can the baby get CalWORKS if Gloria is not an eligible citizen? Let's see what people said. Yes, when Gloria is in the 3rd trimester. Yes, when it is born. So this is where people get confused. There is a rule that says a pregnant person with no other children can get CalWORKS for themselves if they are eligible. But in this scenario, if Gloria doesn't meet the immigration requirements of CalWORKS, she can't, and she wouldn't need that pregnancy anyways because she's already got a minor child in the household. So the pregnancy doesn't make a difference with Gloria's eligibility, but what would make a difference is, it sounds like she's in a DV situation, or I'm sorry, what would make a difference is when the baby is born, because then the baby is a child for purposes of CalWORKS. The pregnant person getting CalWORKS, that is for the pregnant adult. It's not a grant for the in utero fetus, for the baby. So yeah, for CalWORKS, once the baby is born. And does Gloria's status matter for the baby's eligibility? No, the baby is a US citizen, the baby's born here. When can Gloria get CalWORKS for herself? Well, just because she's pregnant, nothing has changed. 3rd trimester, that's just kind of a red herring. There used to be a rule that you only got that pregnant eligibility once you were in 3rd trimester. Now it doesn't matter. You can be at any stage of your pregnancy. But that doesn't matter because Gloria is not eligible. But if she files a U visa as a victim of a crime, it sounds like her boyfriend is abusive. He's showed up and caused a scene at work. If Gloria reports being a victim of a crime to the police and is helpful and cooperative in the investigation or prosecution of that crime, she can apply for something called a U visa. If she has filed the U visa, she is eligible for CalWORKS. Okay. And for Gloria's own benefits, when the baby is born doesn't matter. The baby can get it when it's born. Okay. Next slide.
All right, so we are going to talk a little bit about welfare to work, and I am not going to go into all the details. I'm just going to give a brief overview of the requirements of welfare to work. Next slide. So what is welfare to work? So in order to remain eligible for CalWORKS, adults that are receiving CalWORKS need to be either working or they need to be engaged in what CalWORKS calls job readiness activities. And these can be activities like going to school, getting your GED, going to college. And it could also be things like DV services for survivors. So there are alternative activities than just going to school or working. So that is something to keep in mind when working with survivors or maybe adults that are still learning English. They can attend ESL classes.
There's also a new change coming in 2026 called Reimagining CalWORKS, which is a pilot project by the state to look at other ways they can support families with moving towards self-sufficiency, and recognizing that a lot of folks get stuck in a cycle of getting and losing low-wage jobs because of other unaddressed barriers. And so they are looking at offering more options, such as parenting classes, like expanded behavioral health service options, all sorts of other related services that can help stabilize families and make it easier and more sustainable for parents to get and keep quality jobs. So look for more options. These are the options that are available now. Look for more information about more options coming soon.
And then just a couple more notable things. If an adult is living in the home but is not receiving CalWORKS benefits, so grandma maybe, they are not going to be required to participate in welfare to work. So like Lisa was talking about with, people being in the assistance unit or not in the assistance unit, those adults that are not in the assistance unit do not need to participate in welfare to work activities. And then there are required hours for adults to complete in order to maintain eligibility for CalWORKS. And it's depends on how many adults are in the household and how old the kids are. So less adults and younger children, they are going to have less work hours they are required to do per week. And then for adults who are in the household and are required to do welfare to work, if they are not meeting those minimum hours, then they will get what they call sanctioned, which means that they will no longer get CalWORKS benefits for themselves. And so that just means their amount of CalWORKS will be reduced because the grant they are getting will just be for the children uh, in the household or for adults that are not sanctioned. Next slide. And then there are exemptions for participation in welfare to work. So if there are adults in the assistance unit who are getting aided, but they meet certain requirements, they could be exempt from welfare to work, meaning that they don't need to participate. And so I think some exemptions that we wanted to draw people's attention to are adults over the age of 60 can get an exemption if they are victims of domestic violence and they're survivors and the impacts of that domestic violence are impairing their ability to complete job readiness activities or work, they can get an exemption. People who are disabled can get an exemption. If you are pregnant or caring for a child under the age of 2, you can get an exemption. And I will note that caring for a child under the age of 2 is a once in a lifetime exemption. So an adult can only use that exemption once in their lifetime. It's not once in the child's lifetime. Or if you're caring for a family member who lives in the household that can't care for themselves, and this is not a child. So if someone is living in the home, like maybe an elderly parent or something of that nature, and the adult in the assistance unit is providing care to that elderly person or that disabled person, they can request an exemption. And people who are exempt, they can volunteer to participate in welfare to work, and they can either participate full hours or they can do partial hours. And it's ultimately going to be their choice as to whether or not they want to volunteer and the amount of time they want to volunteer. But if they are a volunteer, they can't be sanctioned for not meeting hours. And volunteers should be able to get their child care paid for by CalWORKS so that they can participate as a volunteer. They can also get the other supportive services, including transportation. Next slide.
Okay, and I'm going to cover CalWORKS rules for survivors of abuse. 60% of CalWORKS survivors have of CalWORKS participants have been survivors of abuse at some point in their life. And domestic violence is one of the most common economically destabilizing factors for families. Separation from an abuser who was very often the breadwinner and who often, as part of the abuse, limits the survivor's access to training and jobs and like economic self-sufficiency because they want that survivor to be dependent on the abuser. And so when there's separation, it's like the financial floor is out from under that family. So this is super common. And yet, these rules are exceptions to the general CalWORKS rule. So this is also an area where we most often see folks not getting treated at like the way that they should, with the exception, because the workers are trained on the general rule and that's what they are used to applying. And so often it can just inadvertently fall through the cracks. And also, if you've ever worked with survivors, you know that for various reasons, a lot of times folks are hesitant to share about their abuse, are used to minimizing and downplaying how it has impacted them. And so it can take some like kind of really gentle exploration and like thoughtful conversations to help draw that out. And the like super quick and automated welfare interview is not usually the place where those facts are going to get really well developed. So this is another place where we often are providing legal services to help understand the impact and like explain that impact to the county. So California law requires that county welfare departments identify applicants who are abuse victims, refer abuse victims to DV supportive services, and this is really important, waive any program requirements for as long as necessary if whatever rule it is makes it more difficult to escape abuse or unfairly penalizes the family. Um, and escape the abuse also includes makes it more likely that the family will have to go back to the abuser. So they may not be like fleeing right now in this moment. They may have separated like some time ago, but without the support of CalWORKS, they may be more likely to get sucked back in to that financially dependent relationship with the abuser. So common things that are waived are welfare to work requirements, adult time limits, which we'll talk about, child support and paternity cooperation, which we'll also talk about. The few things that can't be waived are the deprivation requirement, assets, and income. So if the two parents are living together and let's say the abuser is like making good money, they can't, just because there's DV, they can't say, okay, we won't count him, the other parent, as part of the household and we won't count his income. They can't do that. But what they can do is, if I wake up that morning in the household with the abuser and I show up at the county office and say, I want to apply for CalWORKS, I'm leaving today, then they absolutely should count, should not be counting the abuser's income as available to me starting today. And they absolutely should like give me DV services and allow me to apply for CalWORKS. And that is, you know, we often see folks, if not the day they are leaving the abuser, within like the first week that they're leaving the abuser, apply for CalWORKS. Okay, next slide. How do I prove abuse? So first of all, a sworn statement is sufficient. Okay. That's what you need to know. They can ask for other evidence if you have it, like a letter from a DV agency, a letter from legal aid, a police report, a restraining order, but they cannot require that. And they cannot contact the abuser to corroborate the abuse. Sorry, that's a typo. It says collaborating. I think that was an auto spell check. So yeah, so they can't contact the abuser and be like, is it true you were abusive? Because you can imagine how helpful that information would be. Okay, next slide. There's no specific state form to ask for a DV waiver at this time. We can include with our materials when we circulate them a sample form people can use that advocates developed, but it's not required. It's not required even to put it in writing, although we always recommend that just as a way to prove that you did it. And they can ask at any time, and you can also ask for it to be forward-looking or backwards-looking. And months in which you have a DV waiver of welfare to work does not count towards the 60-month time limit. The county has to give you a notice of whether they are granting or denying your DV waiver. That's something we see often that workers don't really like understand, that they have to actually take formal step on that. They can't just ignore you or say, we want some more info, we want some more info, we want some more info, and then just not decide for months on it. If the county fails to take action after requesting a DV waiver, you can request a hearing too. Often we have where like, I asked for a DV waiver months ago, or when I first applied 2 years ago, and they never like gave it to me. Did you get a notice? No. Then you can still ask for a hearing. Okay, next slide. Okay, Juliana, I'm just gonna like go through this really quickly because I don't think the polling will work anyways. But Gloria, she's caring for Sophia, who's now 4, and now she has a newborn of her own. She's filed for a U visa. She doesn't have a work permit. She's struggling with the baby and the kid and trying to do these welfare to work activities. She's eligible for CalWORKS with her U visa application, but now CalWORKS says her benefits are going to go down because she missed her ESL class, which was her welfare to work activity. Ooh, Gloria's juggling a lot. Okay, so next slide. What can she do? So this is a sanction. Her benefits are being reduced. She can ask for an exemption from welfare to work because she has a child under 2, correct? She can ask for an exemption because she's a DV survivor, correct? She can ask for an exemption because she doesn't have a work permit. If the activity that the county is asking her to do is not possible because of her immigration status, because she doesn't have a work permit, here ESL class, she can probably do that without a work permit, but let's say her plan involves taking classes that cost money and she can't qualify yet for financial aid because of her immigration status. That would be a great reason for them to exempt her. But also, we're going to talk about in a few slides, if she was not offered childcare, because it sounds like she's not getting help with childcare, then they have to give her childcare to attend, whether it's the orientation or the activity itself, she has to be offered immediate and continuous childcare. And if they didn't offer that childcare, they can't sanction her. Childcare, I think, goes up to, I believe it's age 12. So certainly a newborn and a 4-year-old should be getting childcare. Okay, next slide.
All right, so what can you get besides regular cash aid? So now we're kind of going to talk a little bit about childcare and the other types of supportive services that CalWORKS offers. Next slide. And so childcare is probably one of the biggest supportive services that CalWORKS offers. When you start your welfare to work activities, you are supposed to be able to get immediate and continuous childcare available from the time of application. And what's great about this is that you can continue to get this childcare for 2 years or more after you stop getting CalWORKS. So you can finish getting CalWORKS, you can have a stable job, and you can still qualify for subsidized childcare. So during parent participation for welfare to work activities such as school or job training, or during CalWORKS welfare to work orientation, if you need it, you are able to get childcare paid for by CalWORKS. Next slide.
And they also have resources to help you navigate to find childcare if you don't have it. If you do have childcare, they can pay your provider. There's different rates based on the childcare setting, if it's license exempt, if it's licensed, if it's like a preschool or something. But if you don't have childcare, they can help connect you with childcare providers. You don't have to use like a certain childcare provider they assign you to, though.
All right, so other welfare to work supportive services. So we kind of talked about this, but you can get counseling for domestic violence, drug and alcohol counseling, and these are things that welfare to work can help you get. You can also get your transportation costs covered for you to participate in welfare to work activities. If your job that you get requires you to have a uniform or certain tools or clothing that you don't have, you can get help with paying for those things. Jobs that require licensing fees, CalWORKS can help pay those licensing fees. Or if you are participating in school activities like getting your GED or going to college and getting an education, higher education, they can help pay for your books and your supplies.
They'll
And the
also pay any student fees or like lab fees or material fees related to your schooling as well. So a lot of folks aren't aware of that. You don't have to pay that out of student loans, for example. Okay, next slide.
All right, so these are some special situations, and I would say these things are not super common, and these payments are not necessarily super common in the sense that not that people don't qualify for them, but oftentimes people either don't ask for them or they are not given these things. So CalWORKS diversion, this is a payment or service that is given to CalWORKS applicants to help meet needs during a short-term crisis. And that is going to be in lieu of ongoing monthly benefits. So someone who is applying for CalWORKS who just needs like a short-term amount of money so that they can get by for a month or maybe a couple months, but they don't want to get ongoing payments, they can ask for CalWORKS diversion. There are also non-reoccurring special needs, and you can get like a lump sum of up to $600 for that. And then ancillary services that you can get through welfare to work. So items that you need to participate in welfare to work activities. And so like we were saying, like fees for an ID or for getting a work permit. Or if you have a young child and you need extra funds to pay for diapers, so your child can attend childcare, you can ask for for payments, ancillary payments to help do those things so that you can participate in your welfare to work activities. And I think what's important to remember is that in order to get these payments, it has to be directly tied to your participation in welfare to work. You can't just ask for them. It has to be related to your welfare to work activities. Next slide. Okay, and so immediate needs processing, this is for people who are applying for CalWORKS. And when someone initially applies for CalWORKS, they can ask for immediate needs processing. And I will say that people ask, I don't think that I've had a client who's had it granted. I don't know that that bodes well for immediate needs processing, but this is something that you can ask for. When someone applies, they have to qualify for immediate needs processing. So they need to have an emergency need, such as they lack shelter, they're having an medical emergency, there's domestic violence going on, and they are trying to escape that violence. They are being evicted from their home. They need to be facially or they need to appear eligible for CalWORKS benefits. So, if they have very high income, they are likely not going to appear facially eligible and will likely not qualify for immediate needs processing. They need to have less than $100 in cash or liquid resources, and their needs cannot be met by other community agencies. And so when someone asks for immediate needs processing, if they meet all of these eligibility requirements, then they can get up to $200 as an immediate needs payment, and they should be able to get that within the same day that they ask for it. And then their application should be processed within 15 days. Now, if someone's being evicted, then they should actually be able to get the full grant within 3 days.
Okay. And then I'm going to talk next slide about one of, I think, the most important and underutilized aspects of the CalWORKS program, and one that I think our county is really interested in utilizing for families that are eligible for it. Because this is a way to draw down CalWORKS housing assistance before we tap into things that are funded by like county general fund and other local resources for housing assistance. So it's really important for folks to know about this and to flag it. I will say it's also at this stage really new for the workers. It shouldn't be this. This has been around for a while. This has been around for I don't know, 12, 15 years. But I think it was really underutilized until recently. So a lot of workers are not used to processing these application needs. So homeless assistance for CalWORKS applicants and recipients. So if you are working with a homeless family that is a family with a minor child, it can be really helpful to help them apply for CalWORKS in order to get homeless assistance. Homelessness includes also a family with an eviction notice. So they don't have to be on the street. They could be housed but facing homelessness. They could be on the street, they could be doubled up, they could be living in a place not fit for human habitation, or like a garage or an office space, all those things. So homelessness, and they can normally get this assistance once every 12 months. But there are some exceptions where they can get it a second time, even if they've already gotten it. So habitability, disaster, disability-related homelessness, DV-related homelessness. Okay, next slide. So there's two types of homeless assistance they can get through CalWORKS. Neither of them is long-term, but these are often crisis resources that can be really helpful. So temporary homeless assistance. This is available for a family that is either without a home right now, or is like they've run out of ways to stay where they are and they need to leave like immediately. So it can pay for up to $85 a day for a motel for a family of 4 or less, and then that number goes up slightly if the family is bigger, up to 16 days in a row. And this is once a year. So they can get a little over 2 weeks in a hotel once a year. That can be great. That can give them some breathing room if the sheriff is at the door, they are getting evicted, or they are doubled up and they just need to leave for safety reasons or whatever. 16 nights in the hotel. Families must receive this money the same day they ask for it. The same day. So we recommend, if the family is not on CalWORKS and they need it, we recommend they go in person to the county to ask, and to apply for CalWORKS that day and to say they need temporary homeless assistance. The county is not allowed to require them to fully verify all the aspects of CalWORKS eligibility to get approved for this benefit. Okay, they have to process them the same day. They can do what's called deferred verification for most of the requirements. And if they are fleeing a DV situation, then they can get up to 32 days. So that scenario where I left this morning, I can get up to 32 days in a hotel. Okay, that's great, especially if the DV shelters are full, which they often are. Okay, next slide. Permanent homeless assistance. This can either be to preserve permanent housing or to secure new permanent housing. People are very familiar, I think, with the new housing, but they don't think of it as often about preserving existing housing. So if I have that eviction, or if I have new housing, if I'm in the hotel and I got connected, they can pay for the security deposit and last month's rent. It has to meet the affordability threshold, which is the same for a lot of other housing programs. And if I am getting evicted because I can't pay rent, if I got a notice to pay or quit, they can pay up to 2 months of back rent to prevent an eviction. I can get this up to once every 12 months. So you absolutely want to look for this before you're looking to season of sharing, before you're looking to other rental assistance. And you can braid the streams together. You can get 2 months back rent, and if they owe 3 months, you can get the third month from another source. But it preserves like those local pots of funding and helps them last longer and help more families. If you are on CalWORKS already, they have to give this to you 1 business day after you ask for it. Okay. So that is something very often where we are providing assistance because the family asked for it and it's been like a week and they haven't gotten it. And so we're doing legal representation to like communicate with the county and say what's going on, like that they qualify, here's the evidence, they need to be approved. Next step. Okay. There are also 2 slightly longer term, but still transitional housing programs called the Family Services Program, FSP, and Housing Support Program, HSP. I know that is a confusing acronym because we also use HSP for other things, and we use HPS for other things. So when I say HSP for CalWORKS, I'm talking about the CalWORKS Housing Support Program. This is run by OSH in Santa Clara County for helping families experiencing homelessness. The Family Services Program can also work with families who are like at risk of housing issues. It can work with families that are like involved in dependency. These are both supposed to be a housing first model. They can provide all sorts of different services, including short-term rental assistance, but that might go longer than that 16 or 32 nights. It could go like 6 months or something. Security deposits, utility payments, renter's insurance if it's required to rent the apartment, moving costs, housing navigation, case management, legal services and credit repair, employment incentives. So there's all sorts of things that are part of our FSP and HSP programs. So getting families connected with these, immediately you want to look at like, can we get temporary homeless assistance? Can we get them into a motel? Or can we get some money to prevent the eviction? But you can also be referring to this program for longer term. Okay, next slide. I'm going to skip the Gloria scenario in the interest of time. Next slide. Okay. Keeping your CalWORKS. So you got on CalWORKS. You got 16 nights in a hotel, and then you got help moving into an apartment, but you are still scrambling to save up. You are just in the process of getting a job or getting training to support your employment. How do I keep my CalWORKS? Next slide.
All right, so you are going to have to do semi-annual reporting. So there is a redetermination that happens annually, but you have to complete a report called a SAR 7 of any changes that have happened every 6 months. And so on this report, you need to report all of basically all the income you have, no matter how big or how small, and any changes to members of your household, any work changes or anything like that. Anything that could change or impact your eligibility needs to go on this report. And then the grant amount for your CalWORKS benefits, it stays the same for 6 months. And then you submit this report, and then they will recalculate your benefits based on any changes. The important thing to remember is for income, you do need to report changes even when you don't have a SAR 7 due. uh, if that income goes above your income reporting threshold. And when you apply for CalWORKS and you're approved, the county sends you what your income reporting threshold is. And so you just need to make sure that you remember what that is and you report any income that goes over that amount. But what I tell clients is if you're not sure, it's better to report that income than not report it and then end up with an overpayment later. And we always recommend people report things in writing or by submitting things electronically if possible, so that they have proof and documentation that they submitted those changes. Next slide. So what sort of changes do people need to report? So people need to report changes to people. So people moving in and out of the house, kids no longer living with parents 51% of the time. If you move, if your immigration status changes, your student status changes, or someone in the household becomes disabled. And then you also need to report changes in any money. So this could be if your income goes up or your income goes down. If your income goes down, you could end up getting more benefits. If you're working more than you were before, or if you're working less, or if you get any assets or property that you might need to report, or if your family sells any assets or property. Next slide. Child support cooperation. So this is a really important aspect for CalWORKS. So families with only one parent are required to assign their child support to the county. And by doing that, the county will seek child support from the absent parent, and that child support will get paid directly to the county. The thing to remember is that the child support that's paid directly to the county, the family will get $100 to $200 of that passed directly through to them. So if your CalWORKS amount is $800 and you have 2 children and you are getting $200 of a child support pass through, that family is going to end up getting about $1,000 a month because they are going to get a child support pass through to them. And then, so people who are on CalWORKS, they need to cooperate with establishing paternity and with enforcing child support. That is a requirement to maintain your eligibility for CalWORKS benefits. But yes, there is a waiver that you can request, a good cause waiver. And this is specifically for, we will say, domestic violence or interpersonal violence related situations, where requesting child support or enforcing child support or paternity can increase the risk of abuse to either the parent or the child in the home, or if the child is conceived as a result of rape or incest, or any other reason that might be in the child's best interest to not cooperate with child support.
And so I want to actually clarify, because DV is where we often see this come up, but it actually, the best interest of the child applies regardless of whether there's DV. So, for example, if a parent is concerned that pursuing child support, maybe there's a really fragile co-parenting relationship, maybe it's been hard to engage the other parent in the child's life, something like that, and there's a concern that opening a child support case is just going to make that other parent resentful, disengage, whatever. If you believe it's not in the child's best interest, you have the right to say, I want good cause. And I ask for good cause before we open a child support case, before we open a parentage case. And so that's important.
If there's pushback on this, please, we're going to give our information, but this is something else we can help provide legal services for.
Yep. Okay. I know we're going to rocket through kind of the last few slides and skip over the scenarios because I can see there's a lot of great questions and we want to leave some time for that. 60-month time limit, I'll just say for adults only, not for kids, there is a lifetime 60 months you can get CalWORKS for yourself. Your kids can continue to get CalWORKS after your clock runs out. There's various reasons that months don't count towards your 60-month. The 60-month clock, and we call those reasons clock stoppers. So there's all sorts of clock stoppers. You can get a clock stopper related to domestic violence. You can get clock stopper related to any disability or injury that's lasting at least 30 days. So that's broader than like being on disability benefits. Caring for a sick or disabled family member, caring for a child under 24 months can stop your clock. And once you turn 60, the clock no longer ticks. Also, if you've already run out of 60 months, in some circumstances, you can actually get back on CalWORKS. We call that an extension. And examples are DV, caring for a family member age 60 or older. Okay, next. And then also when you get child support, if the child support comes into the county, that can untick months on your clock. Next slide. Okay, we're going to skip over Gloria, and we're going to talk about some more barriers that folks run into. The first hurdle is just the application process. The old paper application was a joint application for CalFresh, Medi-Cal, and CalWORKS. The most common way folks apply now is online, benefitscal.com, but we do still recommend folks go in person to apply. Center Road, North County, South County social services offices. If the client is an immigrant other than an LPR, so like often with our U visa folks, we recommend going in person, or if seeking emergency aid or homeless assistance. So those are all reasons to go in person. You will need to follow up and provide certain verifications, which you can also upload on Benefits Cal. If you went and applied in person, you can still create a Benefits Cal account and upload the proofs online if you want to. If you hand them over to the county, keep a copy or ask for them to give you a copy back. Next slide. Okay,
this is,
so
yeah,
documentation. Sorry, I'm just gonna go through these so we can get to the questions. So there's all sorts of things they can ask you to provide proof of: ID, an SSN if you have it. If you're not eligible yet, there are many people who are eligible for CalWORKS but don't have an SSN, and that's okay. Birth or marriage certificates to prove like parentage, non-citizen status, housing, shelter costs. So some of these things you can provide a sworn statement if you're renting a room and the person renting the room to you won't give you anything in writing. You can do a sworn statement of how much you pay. They're going to ask for like bank accounts, vehicles, but if you're applying for emergency, immediate needs, homeless assistance, they can't hold up that processing while you get all this stuff to them. Okay. They also have to issue a notice if you don't have all this stuff at the time you apply. They have to give you a notice of what proofs they need to approve your case. And that notice has to tell you that if you need help getting these documents, it is their job to help you get those documents. So let's say you don't have a birth certificate for a child, they can help you request a birth certificate. They can help pay the $26 or whatever it costs to get a copy of that document. What they can't do is sit on your application for weeks on end, and then just deny it because you didn't hand over the birth certificate. Okay, next slide. Okay. Also, SB 1569 is the rule that makes certain non-citizen crime victims like DV survivors eligible. And those folks a lot of times don't have any documentation. Sometimes they may not even have ID. They usually don't have a social security number at the point they're eligible for CalWORKS. As they get further along in the immigration process, they may get one. But this is where there's all sorts of flexibility for them to waive the identity requirement or to accept a non-standard identity requirement, a non-standard identity document. Also for trafficking victims, if you ever work with folks who are survivors of human trafficking, they can do a sworn statement that they are a survivor, and they are eligible based on that for 12 months, even if they don't yet have proof from immigration that they've filed an application. Next slide. Mixed status families. If you are an immigrant, you can apply either for yourself and your children if you believe you are eligible, or if you know you're not eligible or don't want to get benefits for yourself, you can apply for just your children. Just be clear that you are applying for just yourself. Just for your children, that you are not applying for yourself. If you are not applying for yourself, they are not required to get your immigration status, and they are not required to get an SSN from you. And of course, we tell people never provide an SSN unless it was officially issued to you by the Social Security Administration. And never provide false or misleading information. So for example, if you are working and you don't have a work permit, you still need to report that work and those earnings. Social Security needs that information to calculate the benefit, so don't lie. But you don't need to be part of the unit if you're not eligible. The information they get is only to be used to determine eligibility for benefits. The county is not passing that information on to anyone at immigration. Next slide. Okay. There's also this idea that getting benefits will hurt your immigration status. Almost no immigrants who are subject to what's called the public charge rule are eligible for CalWORKS. Public charge by law applies only to folks who are applying for a visa, certain visas, or LPR status for the first time. It's almost always LPR status, a green card. And it's primarily folks who are applying on a family pathway or an employment-based pathway who have to pass the public charge test, which considers how likely you are to be financially independent. And one of the factors they can consider is if you have gotten public benefits for yourself in the past. But most folks who do not yet have green cards are not eligible for CalWORKS for themselves if they are going down a family pathway. And most folks who do not yet have green cards who are eligible for CalWORKS, asylees, refugees, U visa folks, T visa folks, those people are not subject to public charge. They are exempt from public charge. So it is a big concern for a lot of people, but it is almost never an actual problem. So that is also something where if folks want to understand their own individual risk for public charge and whether they're subject to public charge, that's an area where we often provide consultations or information to folks. Okay, next slide. So as Juliana and I have talked throughout the presentation, there are a lot of rights that folks have in applying for these benefits and in getting these benefits. Juliana, I'll let you handle this one because I know I kind of jumped over a couple of your other slides.
Okay. So people who are either applying or receiving public benefits, like Lisa said, they have lots of rights. They have the right to be treated without discrimination. They have the right to language access. So if English is not someone's first language, the social services is supposed to provide interpretation services, and the notices do come in I think 10 languages. Lisa may know how many languages, but multiple different languages. And people can just denote what their preferred language is. Um, the county also needs to provide disability accommodations. So if someone is identified as having a disability, the county needs to accommodate that disability, whether that is a physical disability or a mental disability or a learning disability. As long as that disability is identified to the county, they do need to accommodate it. The
And when
county
we
is,
say identified, like I can identify to the county myself that I have a disability and say, or I can say, I have trouble remembering things. I have trouble understanding and following directions. And the county should screen me for a disability accommodation. I don't have to be on disability benefits to get that.
yeah, even like I can't read. That is something the county will need to help people accommodate. There is also a right to confidentiality, and I know this is really big right now, but the information that we provide to the county or that applicants and recipients provide to the county is supposed to be confidential and not disclosed to anybody else. There is a requirement for an adequate notice. And so this is kind of legal jargon, but when a notice is sent to someone to either deny benefits or approve benefits or tell someone they're being overpaid, that notice needs to be sent timely. And it needs to be sent with enough information that the person receiving it understands what's happening to their benefits and why. Um, and then if someone gets a notice terminating their benefits or giving them an overpayment or telling them they're getting sanctioned for welfare to work or whatever it might be, they have a right to appeal that notice. Um, and read the notice for the deadlines to appeal. In general, the deadline is 90 days from the date of the notice. And if you miss that deadline, you can request good cause for late filing. You just need to explain why you missed that deadline. And there's also the right to legal representation, but representation is not going to be appointed by the county. So someone needs to find someone to represent them. And there are multiple organizations in our area that can help. Bay Area Legal Aid is one of them. Next slide. And so just a teeny bit about appeals. So if there is a negative action on someone's public benefits, they have a right to request a hearing, and that hearing is held before an administrative law judge. And at that time, the person can explain why the action the county took is not right. You need to request your hearing, like I said, within 90 days of the date that's written on the notice. It's not 90 days from the date the notice is received. And then you get an additional 180 days to request an appeal with good cause, but you will need to explain why you missed the appeal deadline. And then you can request your hearing either in writing and you can fax it to the county. We put the fax number here, or you can call the 1-800 number and ask for a hearing. Next slide.
There is also a portal on the state fair hearing website for CDSS, which we didn't include here, that people can also fill out.
Yeah.
Yep. So we're going to skip over our last few scenarios. Here is our contact information. So Juliana and I are both super happy to assist with technical assistance or questions about whether something like someone is potentially eligible for CalWORKS or like whether they should be referred to Bay Area Legal Aid for assistance. For direct client intake, folks should access our legal advice line, which is a 1-800 number. It opens at 9:30 every day and it stays open until they reach capacity. It varies by day when they reach capacity. So some days it might be 10:30, some days it might be 12. Sometimes if they finish all the callers from that morning, they'll reopen. But everyone who calls that line can either wait on hold or get a callback, an automated callback that same day. We do let folks know it won't show the 800 number when they call back. It'll be from a blocked number for most folks. Okay, so we are so happy to be here today. One question I did just want to address, I know the CalFresh is on everybody's mind. Folks didn't get their CalFresh allotments for this month yet. I just saw that this morning the president said, even though the Justice Department said in court yesterday that they would follow the court's ruling and issue benefits, this morning the president said actually they won't. So stay tuned for what's happening with CalFresh this November. It is clear when the government shutdown ends, folks should be given retroactive benefits. So we are still telling folks to continue doing your recertifications, file for an application for CalFresh if you need it. With regard to CalWORKS, there's been confusion, and I want to be clear. November CalWORKS payments have gone out. There is funding for CalWORKS for November. If the shutdown continues into December, there is the potential for CalWORKS payments to be impacted. But that situation, as you can imagine, is very dynamic and, not a lot is certain at this point. So do just want to make sure folks know, though, that November CalWORKS is available.